pleasure of introducing Racheal Langley from Assistive Wear. And Racheal and I met because when I was working with Bellevue School District, Bellevue was participating in a pilot study in partnership with Assistive Wear, where we were exploring new ways to support the school. So Racheal is going to share a little bit more about Proloquo and how it can be used to support classrooms. Take it away, Racheal.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I love the overall kind of focus on, I loved hearing about grid too. I popped in a bit early and heard about that as well. So, a bit about me before we get too far into it. I worked for 20 years in the public schools. The first 10 were more kind of traditional SLP with a caseload, primarily with students with really complex communication needs. And then the second 10 years, I was a consultant for a regional network of schools, providing primarily AAC solutions, but I worked as part of our AT team there at the county level. And just a couple of years ago, I left that role and joined Assistive Wear. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Proloquo to go. And I'm here today to give you a bit more information about our newer app called Proloquo. So if you've heard of Proloquo or if you've seen it, if you could give like something, a little thumbs up or something react from your side. I'm curious how many people have had an opportunity to explore it or if this will be all new for you. So um a little bit about me. I am a contractor to Assisted Wear, not quite full time. I also do a few things on the side. Good to know. I see all these little pop-up signals. Thank you. Um, I also still see a few patients or clients privately because I realized as I left the schools and I took a few more steps away, I really missed having kind of my toe still in clinical practice. So I do still work as a private clinician, but a majority of my time is spent with Assistive Wear. There's a little QR code here for a handout, but I've shared it with Sarah as well, so you guys can get that. And I know sometimes when I worked as part of the AT team, when I was able to go to something, I would listen, but I also like these kind of resources to be able to redistribute them out to teams that I support. So, of course, you can ask any questions, but what we know and what we've found out from talking with educators and people who work in the schools is that we hear pretty frequently that AAC is hard to learn. It's this new thing. Sometimes there's high staff turnover. I'm not sure if that's something you experience there as much as we do here, but oftentimes, paraprofessional staff, especially, change out pretty frequently. And then the number one question whenever I've presented to schools is people always ask, well, what do I do if there's this and this and this? There's one of everything in a classroom. It does make modeling really hard. And when I worked at schools, if someone moved in and the IEP just said they used Proloquo to go, even that really wasn't enough information for me to be super helpful because I wouldn't know kind of what grid size. Same with some of the others, right? TD Snap. Okay, well, which page set or which level? Um, and just overall, it we end up spending quite a bit of time adding more academic vocabulary and doing more programming. So knowing that, the team at Assistive Wear set out to address some of these key challenges. So knowing that AAC can be hard to learn, yet it's quite easy to mess up. The people who tend to know the least about AAC tend to do the most drastic kind of editing and changes. And sometimes that's to the detriment of long-term language learning, right? So we might think for today, I only want 4 or 8 words available. But sometimes those words don't come back, and it's really hard to model and demonstrate and teach other words if they're not available. So within Proloquo, what you'll see is that it has what we call a shallow design, where you can really only go 2 folders deep. So instead of going folder, 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 and now you're trying to picture, I think I'm about 6 levels down, you can only go 2 layers deep, and there is a fixed motor plan. That means there's a single grid size, and the vocabulary is well developed when you get it, and you can add and customize to it, but we consider it unbreakable, where we've put these kind of guardrails on to say you need to trust that we have built this on tons of research, and you can't go through and remove words. Really, it's an unbreakable kind of base vocabulary you can add to and customize. We also know that a lot of times parents and teachers feel overwhelmed when they start AAC. So we spent a lot of time kind of designing Proloquo so that it didn't give that feeling of overwhelm, that it's relatively small grid size where there are 48 symbolated buttons on the home screen with 12 not symbolated buttons. And because of the design, it's really as efficient or even more efficient than what we typically recommend in Proloquo to go, which is the 7 by 11 crescendo vocabulary. So we can still support like a less overwhelming design with a relatively small grid size. And then it comes with a complementary app called Proloquo Coach that's full of bite-sized learning and 24/7 support for anyone. And then finally, for the classrooms, hopefully we are getting AAC. And that's kind of what I'm hearing is AAC is getting in the classroom more. It's supporting real curriculum, real learning, real goals, not kind of like creating artificial scenarios to practice language anymore, but really we want that meaningful content to be included. And so the vocabulary of Proloquo has just thousands of words that come right directly from vocabulary word lists. So if you're going to be talking about the butterfly life cycle, the words like cocoon and chrysalis and things like that are already in there. You don't have to go and add them when you're in that science lesson. So it really reduces a lot of the complexity of programming and customization. And overall, there's 3 times as much curriculum vocabulary in Proloquo. So let me just jump to it, and I'm going to show you. This is my Proloquo on my iPad in front of me, and I'm trying my very best, friends, but I don't think the audio comes through. This is my iPad I'm showing up here to show a message construction, but you'll see that words are organized in colorful columns where there's some color coding to show pronouns, what we consider helping verbs, more kind of transparent verbs, and then prepositions, describing words, question words, and kind of our chat column. This last column here that you see in yellow, you'll notice that each one of these buttons have a little notch at the top, and this is where all the fringe lives. So there's one column of fringe available here, but if I want to access more words, I can touch any one of these buttons across the top, and it pulls up additional vocabulary. So here's a whole bunch of kind of fringe folders where I can find more things like I like the car. But also way over here on the right, you'll see there are some words that are not symbolated. And that's intentional that they're a little bit off to the side because we know our most emergent communicators are going to focus on probably the symbolated message in the middle. But as their language grows, we want to model more sophisticated language for them. So there's always what we call related words. Maybe I want to say convertible, but then I'm going to plural, add the plural S at the end. I like convertibles. So now I've made a whole message. It's grammatical. Those related words are always here. And then the grammatical variations are always in the next column. I'm going to go back home. I can show you too with something like the word go. I might really want to say travel or visit. But if I say go, automatically right here, I can say go, goes, went, going, and gone without any traveling to another folder or kind of a press and hold or anything. That vocabulary is right there and available. And we know our kids really need to see that grammatical sophistication modeled before they learn to use it. So that's one piece of that. In addition, when you search for something, this might be a good way to show you. Let's look up the word water. When you search for a concept, you'll see the concepts as a result. So every time the word water occurs, it'll be listed here. And different from other programs, we want to treat each one of those concepts distinctly. So if I'm talking about the water I drink, I'm going to find that under food. If I'm talking about the water that fish live in, it's not going to be under food and drink. It's going to be under nature. And then if I'm talking about the water to wash my hands, that's in a third place under care. So if I select one of them in the search feature, you'll see there's a little blue outline around that tab there and nothing else on the screen activates. I need to press that icon. Oh, it's in nature, and there it is, water. After you complete that sequence, the rest of those words are available. You're in that category to say, oh, am I talking about fresh water? I'm talking about, maybe the habitat for the animal. So you can see a lot more curricular vocabulary is in there. But no matter which folder or even subfolder that I'm in, there's always going to be these two rows of what we call static core vocabulary at the top. And those are the most frequently used words that can interact with those words within Fringe. So maybe I want to ask, do you want to maybe study or learn about the rainforests? And I can combine those from above. I can always travel back. If I want to change my message, do you like to go maybe to down here are my articles, a and the. I'm going to go back to nature, go back to, where was I? Habitats. Do you like to go to the rainforest? When I've finished a message, you'll see there's a share icon. I can always send that to someone. I can email, text, whatever I need to, or send it to an air printer as a way to kind of capture that conversation. Now, there's something new that just came out at the beginning of this year, and it's called focus mode, because one of the number one things we've heard when we developed Proloquo is we like to be able to mask. I have a beginner learner. I want to hide some of this. It still feels like a lot. And that's just something we feel strongly. We know we've seen many, many times where sometimes that masking happens by really well-intentioned teachers or families or providers. But then those words often don't become unmasked and we kind of get stuck at a smaller vocabulary. So while you cannot mask, you can use something we're calling focus mode. So in this case, I'm going to go to these three dots in the corner and I'm going to select some words that I really want to focus on. Maybe I know we're going to be talking about food today, and I might talk about want and not want. But I'm going to go into fruit and say, here's what we have. I can tell you today we can taste and try some bananas, oranges, strawberries, apples, and maybe some melon. And when I'm done picking the words I really want to focus on, I press confirm. And you'll notice there's just a little bit of motion with them, how they're moving just a little bit. And what we know about just the way our brains are wired is this will help draw kids' attention just with that little bit of light and motion, and hopefully remove what we often do, which is sometimes more adult prompting to kind of say, nope, not that one. Try this one. We don't have any lemons here today. Try that one. So it draws their attention and they can select it. But if they really want to say, I do not want raspberry, they can still touch the things that are not part of that focus mode. It's really just drawing visual attention and to support a conversation or almost like a topic board in that way. You can use the core that's kind of the static core at the top, or you can you can travel in it too, but it's going to flash and say, oh, we were working in the food category. Let's go back. And it brings you back to that kind of topic that you've highlighted. At any time, if you're done or if the student is done, you just hit cancel and it goes back to the full color mode. I'm showing you right now in the regular kind of color configuration, but if I put my iPad into dark mode, it looks a bit more high contrast and it just pops a little bit more. And what I found is people just have their preference. It might be for actual visual needs of a learner, but it also could just be, man, I like that better in dark. It's not quite as bright. I personally like the search mode better. Let's do, whoops. I'm going to search for the word board and show you again, here's like a multi-meaning word, right? I could mean board like a board game. I could mean board like I'm boarding a plane, an ironing board. I need a board to fix something at the house. And then there's lots of other, I lost it. Hang on, let me bring it back. Board. I'm going to talk about a board game. So now I like how in the search feature, it's a little bit easier to see that contrast when it's in the dark mode, but it's user preference there. So that's a quick little preview of the vocabulary and of search mode and the focus mode. The next thing I want to show you, I'm actually going to move to the next slide. Because if I turn my iPad into the portrait mode, I press the power button and it goes to sleep. And then I have to open it again. Hang on. When it's in portrait mode, right now I have just a giant message bar. So if I wanted, I could just write and it would keep going and fit more content. But something we developed at the end of last year is another way to interact with words. And we find this especially helpful for a lot of things in the classroom when you're either working as a group or you're doing some like supported decision making. And that's what we call our thinking space. So down here in the lower right there, there's this button with three squares. And when I click it, the whole screen at the top kind of goes into a light bright mode. And now I can talk about things that I like. And maybe I want to talk about things that I don't like. And I can interact with them and move them around. So maybe I want to talk with a class, and maybe we're going to go back to our fruit example and say, Sarah, what do you think about strawberries? Do you like strawberries or not like strawberries? And if I'm screencasting, the whole class could even see as I'm talking about this. And maybe I just want to go through and say, oh, I don't like oranges. I like pears. But you can kind of do either a personal activity with an AAC user or a small group or a class. When you're done, again, you can capture that either by it kind of sends just the message part or the thinking space it sends off. And so you could capture that if you have kind of a conversation together, or maybe you're planning out part of your day and you want to talk about the different things you're going to have in school, where maybe, first, you're going to go to class, and then maybe you're going to go and have some lunch. Rachel, you lost lunch. Meals, drink, lunch right there. Then you have lunch, and then you're gonna go and oh, it's recess time after lunch, and you can kind of plan out the day. And maybe if I even want to review with a student, like, well, what happened throughout the day? We could even go in and say, well, at lunch I got angry because I didn't get to finish, but then I had to go out to recess. And we can kind of talk through that. So we have some students who have been in classrooms where they've not been identified as somebody with enough communication need that they need personal AAC. But if we've had something like this available, the teacher or other staff in the classroom can kind of use this as a tool to do some problem solving. Because sometimes when emotions get high, language gets a little low, right? And sometimes we can't explain ourselves as fully as we'd like to. So those are a couple examples of how you might use thinking space, and that came out last fall. And if you have Proloquo, you should have full access to thinking space. I'm going to go back to my regular mode. One important thing about Proloquo is that when you have an individual license for a student, anybody around that student can have access to that vocabulary to full Proloquo at no extra charge. So I would just go in. Obviously, this one's licensed to me, but if this was a student license, I could go into the team members and just invite, maybe I'm going to invite the mom, maybe I'm going to invite an outside therapist or the teacher. They will get an email that will just say, if you have an assistive wear account, log in. If you don't, create an assistive wear account and you can just download and go, and you'll have access to the same customizations on that student's vocabulary. When I invite someone, I get to decide if I trust them to be an editor or not, really. Administrators get to invite other people and can change things like the region, whether it's US, UK, Australia, or what voice and things like that, where an editor can add customizations and a viewer just gets to experience a vocabulary and does not get to do all those extra things. Um, Once you do that, you literally just enter their email address and they get an invite. And you can have, there really is no limit to the number of people on a team, because what we know is that kids do best when they have a community of communication partners around them. So if everyone around them has that same vocabulary, they're more likely to use it and be supported. Um, One last thing that really surprised me about Proloquo when I started using it is I spent way too much time when I was kind of in my consultant role of helping people understand how to make sure they had a safe and secure backup to a vocabulary. Too much time. And then sometimes if a vocab got lost, then we would have to go through their last 8 backups and decide which one was the right one and things like that. Proloquo thankfully just has cloud-based backup, so as long as it talks to the internet, you don't have to do anything. It's passive. It just backs up the most recent copy. If you have a full team and you've invited multiple people that have potential to edit, it will only let one person edit at a time so that you can't accidentally overwrite one another. But as soon as I make changes, I've done it with a parent in the room where I've made some changes and the parent screen just kind of does a quick little refresh and that word just appears on their device as well. So um, those are just some. Oh, I'm still on that slide. Let me move on and stop sharing. Those are some of the features. I've included these in the slides, but also in the handout you have. So just as a recap of kind of what that home screen looks like, that there's navigation tabs there at the top, 48 buttons that have symbols. Um, and then this kind of the default is to have the conjunctions and articles shared right there. But as you select a word, that then becomes kind of related words, which I think of as almost like a thesaurus. So if I press good, I'm going to get good, amazing, awesome, terrific, things like that. And then, of course, a full keyboard, a search option, and the ability to customize down there. When you're in a folder like this one, now the blue tab is pressed a bit here, so I see the rest of my options for describing words. You'll have the content below, but again, those two top rows of static core, those high frequency words stay and are always available. And you can see how now related words and the grammar buttons are available there too. So what makes Proloquo unique is that with 48 symbols and those 12 text-only buttons, we've managed to have a vocabulary that's much more efficient and richer in curriculum vocabulary and just um, much more accessible to a whole wide range of ages. Because the screen has fewer buttons, it's not 77 or 84 or 114. Sometimes people look at it and think, oh, this is meant for younger kids. But then because there's some written words along the side, some people look at it and go, oh, that's for people who can read. But really, what we've tried to create is something that can support both a really early communicator who's not yet reading, who may just focus on the middle of the screen, but also enough variety and specificity of vocabulary that it can support someone through a lifetime without having to, like, oh, now you're in middle school, let's make your vocabulary bigger. The words are there. They may not get into like page 2 of a folder on algebra or something as a young person, but it's there and they don't have to kind of restart. So um we've had a recent update this spring, and that took us to over 4,500 symbol supported words. They're not maybe all represented right now because we're trying to give some individual control, but if you go to add a concept, there are other symbolated words that are there and ready to be added. But all in all, there's over 16,000 total unique words that support across a lifespan. I mentioned this, that our goal is to help our learners have AAC everywhere. So if you have an individual license, you're really not just buying it for that user. You don't have to purchase an additional license for the teacher and for the SLP and for the parapro and the bus driver. There really is, as long as they have an iPhone or an iPad, they can be invited to that team. And again, they see the version that that child has. So if it's already been customized to have their family and their pets and their favorite things in it, you invite them to that team, and that's what the whole team will see. When they also get Proloquo coach too. So Proloquo Coach is just an individualized kind of support tool. So it's not like, oh, we're all learning this one part together. If someone's walking through it and they're up through the middle of coach and they're learning about more sophisticated things, someone else can have a personalized journey where they're still at the beginning. This is what I know Sarah Ayers referred to this a little bit. We are exploring other ways that we feel language can be represented in classrooms. So we know that because Proloquo has that rich vocabulary and there's already curriculum words in there, that we can do several things just by using it in a classroom, including better demonstration of grammar, more rich, much more vocabulary where we can add specificity and interest. We can visualize concepts. So when we teach a word, we can show how there's different meanings of those words. The curriculum vocabulary is already there, and then there's a full keyboard, which is this was important to me when I was in your role, but the keyboard, I know I didn't click on that when we were there and show you, but the it aligns with all the buttons on the main screen. So if you put a key guard in, it will largely the alphabet of the keyboard will fit the key guard. Anyway. Um, so that you could have a conversation, you could build a word map. And now that we have that thinking space, you really could put a word in the middle and tell me all the things you know about a frog. It jumps, flies. Oh, it eats flies, and you can have a conversation that is supported kind of in this multimodal way. So I loved that we heard a bit about this too with Grid, that we really do see it benefiting more than just the students we've typically seen as AAC users. We know some schools in the Pacific Northwest there that you guys have a whole bunch of languages that in my little area I don't have, and we've worked with schools that have as many as 26 different languages and dialects, and that's a lot. So we see that there's already a lot of multilingual learning going on where we're trying to like dual code things in the classroom and just support language learning with as many visuals as possible. And we know Proloquo can do that as well. Sometimes it's that, giving a visual representation to the discussion or decision making and thinking space. Even kids that have speech can kind of seek that out as a visual tool to help them walk through kind of problem solving. Um, and then students that have episodes of non-speaking. I have a colleague at Assistive where Dr. Alyssa Zisk, who is brilliant, and they're autistic. And when they were growing up, they did not have access to AAC and kind of discovered it on their own journey. But they will talk about whether or not something can pass the Zisk test. Like if they were a student in school and they had a moment where they, because of sensory overwhelm or emotional overwhelm, they were not able to communicate and tell people what they needed some kind of tool. And they still do that now, where they'll get something that's text based and type it out, or symbol based. So we're happy to say in classrooms where we can provide this as a tool, this would pass that Zisk test, so to speak. So I see some questions, but I talked a bit about Proloquo Coach. There is a little link that's included in that handout where you can watch just a little video, but it's based on research of how adults learn. It's bite-sized learning. I've used it as ways where if I find an article on, say, attributing meaning, I want people to understand how we're going to use AAC in our modeling to attribute meaning to students' behaviors. I can find like the little blurb on that, and it's literally a 2-minute read. And I can use the share feature and just send out the link to that whole team for that AAC user. And they don't have to have Proloquo or Proloquo Coach installed. That link goes to them as a web link, so they can just read it and kind of keep the team on the same page. So, and then finally, for I think all of you in the room, but we have a free professional license that's intended for SLPs, OTs, AT professionals, SLP assistants. It's really not intended for teachers or families, but for people who are in roles where they're really supporting and considering and evaluating the needs of AAC users. So feel free to use that code. It's on our website and you can apply. Because we manage our licenses outside the App Store, we can grant these professional licenses much more quickly. I don't know if anyone here has been on the wait list to get Proloquo to go. That goes through the App Store, so we have only so many we can give away at a time, but we can be a lot more generous with the professional license here. So if you're considering or you want to look around and explore some of the features we talked about today for yourself, I encourage you to take a look. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see see the questions, or maybe one of you guys have a kind of priority. Is there anything that came up that I need to look at first?
I can read them through to you if you'd like, Rachel.
If you don't mind, I'm scrolling, but
Yeah, so there's one that says, if schools or families have already purchased Proloquo to go, is there a way to transfer the license to this new version at a reduced cost?
there is. So depending on how recently, if you've been kind of a long term, you've had Proloquo to go for a long, long time, you get a reduced cost. I can't remember off the top of my head. I can share that link with Sarah, and she's welcome to share that out. But then if you've bought it more recently, I think it's even a bigger discount. So there are some discounted rates for people who.
That's awesome. Okay, here's another question. Do team members of a student license have access to verbal output on their device?
Well, fully functional. There's voice output on all team members. Yes.
And last one I see here, is there a time of year when the program is on sale?
So in May and October, the individual license has gone on sale, but we're in conversation because, to my knowledge, I don't know that that sale has applied to the way we sell license. We have sold licenses to the schools and to schools in the past. So I know a lot of people have talked about Proloquo as subscription. It is available in the App Store as a subscription, and that's really meant for families to have an easy on-ramp. Anyone can get a free 1 month trial, even if you're not a professional. But for some families who just want to try it out and they maybe don't have access to a team or an AT professional, it's in the App Store to say you could try it for 2 or 3 months for $10 or $20 and like not be a huge commitment. But for schools and for funding, we recommend that the multi-year licenses. So you can buy a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year license. And that's where those multi-year licenses to schools are not yet something that are discounted, but we're working on some new ways to support schools. And that's part of my mission with working with assistive wear. And we're really excited for what's to come. So I think even in the next remainder of this year, we'll have some more updates to share. So maybe we can come again when we have another another something to share with your group.
Wonderful. We have another meeting in December, another statewide meeting. So if you'd like to join then, you're always welcome.
We'll be on a good track by then and have more to share. So yeah, I'm
I
seeing the question. Schools do not pay the monthly subscription. I didn't have time here, but there's a way you can view and manage the licenses on a web-based kind of management page. So if my school purchased 10 1-year licenses, but only used 3 right away, the clock starts on those 3. And then if it goes all year and they're due again, you only pay to renew those 3. You still have access to all 10. And then if you use one for maybe halfway through the year, you activate the other 7, and you get to the end of the year, you're only charged for the prorated amount that you used. So you'd be charged for 3 full licenses and 7 half-year licenses. So that's all through a web management tool where you can see where they're assigned, what team they're on. If someone moves, you can pull it back. And then you can kind of click a little magic button that calculates it all out and shows you based on when you bought it and when you started using it, how much you would be charged for a renewal. So you're not charged for time it's not been deployed. And it gives people in kind of those AT lending roles a little bit more control over those, seeing the teams and the licenses. And it's not through, like I said, the App Store. That's managed through an assistive wear license management. So I think I got at them all. Did that hit most of the question? Is it available? So it's not a single purchase. The apps, if you look in the App Store, both Proloquo and Proloquo Coach are available at no cost because it's just the download, but you need a license to activate it. And that's where you could use a professional license from Assistive Wear. You could do a 1 month trial, or you could purchase a single year or multi-year license. When I seek funding, or when I see people seek funding for a dedicated device, we suggest you just do the 5-year license because that would last for the life, hopefully, the life of that device. And by the time it was time for a new device, the license would just kind of go with it, and it's funded as a bundle. So I'll
Thank
stop now.
you so
Thanks.
much, Rachel. It was really great to have you on. There's so much to explore within all these programs that you've shared. So thank you so much for sharing about Proloquo and Proloquo Coach.